So as you'll know, my channel on my Instagram covers all aspects of the luxury lifestyle, whether it be nice bags, fancy restaurants, fine cigars, or even world travels. But I like to think that I hold it down with some grounding to reality in terms of my mindset and my actual ways and amount of spending on these types of things. And with that being said, over the many years I've had my channel, I've gotten two distinct types of questions when it comes to what I spend my money on. Now, one is more just the curiosity around how I accumulate that amount of money, while the other is distinctly more cutthroat, shall I say, around why I even bother wasting my money on what they consider frivolous or frankly gaudy things. Now, of course, everybody is entitled to their own opinion, and while I personally believe that my money is mine and only my business, the common thread amongst both is a mindset that everybody has a finite amount of money, or they're implied to have similar spending habits, and that there's no way someone could have enough money to be able to spend on their basic necessities as well as these luxurious or frivolous things. And I must say, it's very easy to judge, and also similarly quite easy to forget if you take a step back that everybody is different. We all have different interests and therefore different ways in regards to this situation we'd like to spend money. I just happen to, with that being said, like luxury, and I've shaped my career and therefore my spending in a way that I'm able to sustain that lifestyle comfortably. Nowadays I'd consider myself somewhat more thoughtful and even frugal when it comes to spending on luxury and non-luxury items, and I was just very cutthroat around cutting out the spending and the things that I didn't need and prioritizing the money on things that I actually do need or do want to buy in the long term. I just wanted to sit down and share some tips of what I personally do to allow myself the funds and also the guilt-free spending to afford myself these nice to haves. And while I must preface this video by saying these tips won't exactly free up the funds for you for a Chanel bag or an Hermes bag, in any case it will give you more money to put towards either savings or to play around with for some smaller luxuries in your day-to-day life. And if you think you could never afford nice things, the chances are those funds are actually being siphoned away by other means. And the first tip that I have is just, I think the most obvious one in regards to doing an audit of your spending: just cut down on unnecessary or expensive subscriptions. This could be anything from your Amazon Prime, just getting deliveries that are a little bit quicker than you would if you use the free delivery option, to recurring payments for things that you don't use. Potentially you have a very expensive gym membership, or it could be even things like your Spotify and then maybe your Deezer. A lot of people have multiple accounts of the same thing. And then obviously the most obvious ones of all being streaming platforms for films. So your Netflixes, yeah, you might get your Amazon Prime, but it could be also like your Now TVs and HBO of the world. I think we all know that if we were to look at our direct debits in our bank account, that we would have a lot of recurring spends, that we should really be frank with ourselves and challenge ourselves as to whether we're getting the most value for money out of it or even use it at all. And if you do use these things but they are more expensive than they need to be, for example the gym, do you need, if you're just doing it leisurely and you're not competing, for example, a gym membership that is like £200. Similarly with your streaming services, do you actually use them all? And to be honest, you should probably ask yourself, is spending all your time watching TV and all your money watching TV worth it in the long run? So recurring payments are the ones that really seem very, very small and insignificant on their own, but when you bundle them up and snowball them, they can really be quite the drain on your funds. Consider either cutting out completely or downgrading, or potentially even sharing recurring costs or subscriptions, for example with music. So Spotify, myself and my boyfriend have a shared account for that. That lowers the costs, okay, slightly, but we're both listening to Spotify, so we may as well both have a shared account. Next up on the list that I stopped doing a very, very long time ago is doing actually my own nails. So I know, especially in the blogger community, influencer community, there is this image where you always have to be presentable with really great nails. And I myself fell for this too, because I went to the nail salon many times a year, and these costs added up quite quickly because it's around £50 or what, like $60 or something if you get your nails done each time, depending also on how elaborate you make the design, or if they've got to remove your old set. It can really add up to what is a very expensive habit for something that only stays on your fingers, let's be honest, for like 2 or 3 weeks at a go. Is it actually going to be the end of the world if you don't have them done? Or potentially, if you were to do them yourselves, if you could just expend that extra time, the time that you're already sitting in a salon chair and you're having small talk that I frankly could skip. I personally found that investing in my own nail polish kits or manicure sets, even a UV light, is something that, okay, you might front load the cost once, but actually all in, I feel like all of that equipment is around like £60, £70. And if I'm sat in the chair, I may as well be sat at home in the comfort of my own home. I use the cleanest utensils, only I've been using them. I get to come up with my own designs. A lot of the time some nail techs completely mess up my vision, which is funny because they had one job, right? I'm not saying I'll rule it out, but I feel like for a recurring expense, way too expensive. We just don't need it. Now on to tip number 3, and this one is also around the kind of vanity point, and it's around hair. Primarily haircuts and treatments. These are things that I've stopped doing recently, actually in the last couple of years, as often as I used to do. There might be some merit to getting your hair done every 6-8 weeks in terms of minute trim or something, get rid of those split ends. But I feel like to get your hair done, i.e. dyed or styled every 6 to 8 weeks, is not only overkill in terms of the financial aspect, but also it's so damaging to your hair. And a lot of these products actually that you can use as preventatives in between haircuts, you can actually buy it for use at home, like the Olaplexes of the world. I've spaced out when I get haircuts, or sometimes I will get my mum or a friend to do my hair that I trust. If it's just literally a trim, I'm just not that bothered. If I want my hair recolored or whatnot, as you can see, I do have colored hair. I've spaced those out massively. Like the last time I got my hair dyed was probably last year. If I will dye my hair, I will get it done on a discount or a deal. There are always discounts going on. Definitely don't just go and below like £200 or £300 for no reason. One time I actually blew, if you can believe it, like I think it was £700 for a haircut, colour and blow dry. And I remember seeing that receipt and just almost having a heart attack because I thought it was a typo and it wasn't. So I always think, even if it would be easier just to cut all of that out and just go back to, brunette, natural hair colour, that would save me so much hassle and the health of my hair. So that's a developing thought. Now on to the next point, and this one is one where a lot of my peers blow a significant amount of money on, and this is around drinks. The drinking culture in the UK is very, very big. I feel like in the West, in just society in general, a cocktail in London these days, I feel is frankly extortionate. It's around £15 if on a good day. And I feel like when I went to the Shard, a cocktail was about £38 for something that you will literally drink and an hour or two later will come out as pee-pee. There is no real medicinal health benefit to drinking a bunch of alcohol. And you know what, I'm not saying you shouldn't drink or anything at all. There are certain occasions where it's appropriate. I feel like at least on the daily or weekly, if you're especially around work colleagues that like to do it, you know, you only need to skip a few of these drinks and you'd be saving potentially hundreds a month. Maybe even pre-drinking at home. House parties were all the rage at university. I miss those. I miss having the comfort and familiarity of someone's home. And this actually segues really nicely into my next point, because it's around not buying work lunches or, you know, work coffees. I realise, again, this might be purely for convenience if your time is worth more than your money. But for me in particular, I don't mind putting in that extra effort to thermos my coffee up. I have an espresso at home. It's really nice. It's the same quality, if not better, than some coffee machines. And I also don't mind meal prepping. I have an issue actually where I literally physically cannot make a meal for one or a meal for two. It always comes out family size. There is always food for the next day. So for me, meal prepping is a no-brainer. And it's not even intentional that I therefore save quite a bit of money. I personally find that I make, if I say so myself, pretty delicious food, so does my boyfriend. And to be honest, I prefer what I make because I know exactly what's in it, and I don't want to go out for a wild goose chase to find an establishment that does not have a massive queue, because everybody come 12:30 is out buying their lunch, and they're just obviously very expensive for what you actually get. And I know some people will argue £10 or £15 for a lunch to get that convenience is not that much, but added up every single day, that is hundreds of pounds a month. Also, I know that it's not that good for you. A lot of people gain weight when they eat like that every single day. And some people will also get takeouts in the evening. So this kind of stuff really adds up, not just for your wallet, but also for your gut and just health in general. I don't care about the optics. If you think I'm poor, fair enough, but I would rather stare at a wall than to have uninteresting small talk. And rarely do I even actually have enough time to walk to a stall or to a restaurant. So the upside to me of meal prepping and bringing my own packed lunch is way more beneficial than eating some expensive processed food. The final habit that I cut out from this lifestyle section of this video is the unnecessary tech upgrades that people constantly do every single year. This is like having the latest phone or latest laptops. Every year there is always going to be something new, something minute as well and negotiable, like, ooh, this camera has 1 more megapixel. And there's just no need, in my opinion, to switch it up every single year, especially if you're buying the phones outright. And obviously you also get the hassle of transferring all of your data, contacts and whatnot onto something new. That's a lot of lost time. And frankly, if I am with my current phone, can still call, text, my apps still work, my screen's not busted or cracked, it's fine. I also don't want to be a target to be mugged. Frankly, I've got separate gadgets for separate things I need it to do. So for example, I don't need that extra megapixel when I actually have a wonderful Sony mirrorless camera that is way more state-of-the-art than any iPhone could ever be. I'm just not going to spend an extra £1,000 or more potentially to get a brand spanking new phone with some nice features but nothing groundbreaking before it invariably goes out of date the next year. And you know, the same again, like I mentioned with laptops. My MacBook Air, I've had now for like 6 years, 7 years, potentially even more. I replace a cable here and there, but it does what it needs to do. Who cares what model it is? And now let's move on to the shopping portion of this video. And one of the earliest shopping habits that I stopped when it came to fashion, and it seems obvious, but I don't think a lot of people realize this, is I stopped buying fast fashion, low quality fashion like the Primarks and potentially like the H&Ms or even like the Sheins. I've never bought from Shein, but obviously, let's be real, it's cheap for a reason. For me, investing in higher quality materials, better brands, I feel like that's more of a worthwhile investment than lots of cheap things that I will essentially throw away when I am bored of them or run out of closet space. And I've experienced this many times myself, and recently I've done massive culls of my wardrobe because frankly, everything that I had that I never really touched anymore was stuff I was buying when I was in my teenage years. It was just loads of money spent on like H&M and stuff like that, and nothing I wore back then years later do I even have in my wardrobe. They're all investment pieces, they're all higher quality pieces, and I personally think the hassle also of me shifting all of that stuff that I no longer wore, the tat, I basically was at a loss because I either donated it to charity, which obviously is for a worthy cause, or for the more expensive cheap things, I just basically had to sell them at a loss or throw it away if it was busted. So, and I think I've said this in my previous videos, but I'll say it again, cheap is expensive, expensive is cheap. Anything fast fashion, I don't tend to like follow the trends or anything. I tend to steer clear. I will buy investment pieces that are classic, that I see longevity in, and ultimately that will yield me the saving. Next up, following quite nicely from the previous point around avoiding fast fashion, is by also avoiding spending on items where there is no kind of incentive. What I mean by that is, where possible, I like to leverage existing offers or loyalty schemes from vendors. So whether that be an Amex card where I can get points, transfer those into nice benefits, or shopping at stores which I can get extra discounts on, or again earn loyalty for, like the Harrods, Louisa V Aromas of the world. I will legitimately drive the extra miles or wait for an indefinite amount of time and shop around if it's not quite right. And I feel like Even if it seems like more hassle for other people, I will do that because ultimately, you know, it's an outgoing. I want to earn as much loyalty points or as much cash back or benefits that I can to make it worthwhile for me. Now, another fashion habit that I also stopped, quite related to the previous point, is following fashion trends, and I basically buy items now off cycle, basically previous collections. I really don't care about getting something current because fashion is very cyclical, and chances are something that's out is going to come back in a couple of years time, and you'll also save a lot of money if you buy off season or in previous collections. It's just a very expensive habit to try and keep up with trends, and invariably by the time that you get the item that's on trend, I would almost say it's off trend because a new one is already starting. So by steering clear of buying into these fashion trends, which is a very expensive and incremental lifestyle creep, to be honest, is one that saved me so much money. Just before I finish the video, it's actually worth me clarifying a few things before we wrap up. And the first one that I want to talk about is that there is a huge difference in being frugal versus being cheap. Now, for me, someone who is frugal is somebody who is very careful and thought out, with a very forward-thinking viewpoint on what they purchase. Whereas somebody who is cheap, I find, not only is that like a sad way to live your life when you're essentially almost enslaved to money, you refuse to spend it, you basically let it build up, and you may even die without spending a single penny. I also find it, in addition to that, quite deplorable if it also means that it makes you prone to spending other people's money. But as long as you save your own money, then that's the end goal. People who are cheap, man, they are the worst kinds of people, and I'm definitely not suggesting by cutting down on certain spending that you become somebody who is no fun and doesn't want to go out and doesn't want to buy things, because that's no way to enjoy life either. And also people won't enjoy your company because they'll know exactly what you're trying to do there. And frankly, those are people that I personally steer the hell away from. I've cut people out because of that. And actually, with that point in mind, my second one is clarifying that any spare funds that you make by enacting these tips or other ones that you find helpful should go towards, first and foremost, settling your basic necessities before considering spending that money on nice to have. So, you know, these tips are definitely not excuses to spend all of that saved money on things you don't need or won't use. Putting food on the table, frankly, is more important. But also, buying things will not make you happy or a better person long term. It's just going to clutter your life. And finally, I think it's important to note that mindset is very crucial to all of this, and that will make you successful in sticking to these tips long term. You shouldn't really care what anyone thinks about you and how you spend your money. And so what that you don't buy a lunch at work? So what you don't have the latest iPhone? The only person who cares about it is you. And you'd be lucky, actually, if you thought someone was thinking about you for more than just like 1 minute a day, if that. More cases than not, people think that they're super self-important when you're actually not. Everyone has their own stuff to deal with. And so I really wouldn't care so much about optics when it comes to some of these habits. Anyways, with all that being said, that brings us to the end of this video. I do hope it was useful and gave you some food for thought. And if you think there are any tips that the community would benefit from your experiences, then please do share them in the comments below, as I'd also personally love to see them. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next one.